This is, even though we're already halfway through January at this point in 2018, this is actually the first new episode that we've recorded it's actually been almost a month. I was looking back and I saw that our last recording session was on 12/17/2017, and today is the 14th of January, so that's pretty close to a month, actually, since we've recorded. But we're starting off the new year with one of our non-movie themed episodes, and we're dedicating an episode to a horror icon. We were talking about this when we were first talking about doing this particular episode. The name Nick Castle is probably only recognizable to a certain group of horror fans, and those would be horror fans that are familiar with the Halloween franchise, because Nick Castle is the Shape from the original Halloween movie in 1978, and it turns out he's going to be the Shape again in 2018's Halloween movie that is supposedly started filming this weekend.
Yeah, I couldn't be more excited about it. I was a little skeptical at first because Nick Castle is about 70 years old now. That kind of goes along the lines of this new Halloween movie and how we talked about Michael Myers, how old he's going to be in this film, and based upon the original movie and the fact that they're doing this 40 years after, he's going to be 61 years old. And that was kind of concerning, I think, for both of us. But anyhow, Nick Castle is back, and I don't know about you, but the original Halloween, I always thought that Nick Castle's portrayal of the Shape was always the best out of all of them. And there's a lot to look at here. We've got Nick Castle, obviously the original, Dick Warlock, Halloween 2, George Wilbur, Halloween 4, Don Shanks in Halloween 5, and then George Wilbur came back for Halloween 6. Can't remember the guy from H2O, what his name was. Brad Lorre from Halloween Resurrection. We won't even talk about that one. And then Taylor Maine from Zombies Halloween. And although I'm not a big fan of the zombie rendition of Halloween, his remake, I did think Taylor Maine did a pretty darn good job in the role. But anyhow, going back to Nick Castle, out of all the people that have donned the Michael Myers mask, he has always been my favorite.
And it's funny when you see Nick Castle in person, really at any stage in his life, whether it was in 1978 or 2017 or 2018, he doesn't look like the kind of guy that would be a serial killer at all.
No, he doesn't. He's got like a real kind of nice looking, just like sort of a gentle look on his face. And
if you were to hang out with him at all, you would get the sense that he is a hippie. I mean, he just has that look. Well, they all are. Well, yeah, but I mean, especially nowadays, he's got the long hair and the ponytail, and
yeah,
I can't remember if when we met him at Flashback a couple of years ago, if he was he wearing a Hawaiian shirt?
No, he was wearing I don't know. I have to look at the picture of him again. But I don't think it was like I think he had like a t-shirt on, a Chicago t-shirt, and like a button-up shirt over it. And then baseball cap, and he had the ponytail. You're probably thinking of Tommy Lee Wallace. He would wear, he always wore the Hawaiian shirts.
Okay. Yeah, and you're right. They all when you see any of those behind-the-scenes photos from back in 78 and stuff, they all had the long hair, and
the whole like Halloween filmmaking crew all were a bunch of hippies, yeah, like you said, like long hair. It was like the 70s, and you look at John Carpenter, Nick Castle, Tommy Lee Wallace, that was their thing, and I think it did kind of transcend to currently to today, like they're still kind of that way, kind of like the Hollywood, California hippies, I guess.
But yeah, speaking of California hippies, I mean, Sid Nick Castle was born and I'm assuming pretty much raised in L.A., and he was a... Well, I don't even know. Do you even know the story of how he got onto Halloween?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
That I do know that. And I don't know much about Nick Castle, I'll be honest with you. But how basically he was a friend of John Carpenter in film school. They were buddies. And and what happened was both of them wanted to be directors, and Carpenter did Assault Precinct 13, and then he was going on to do Halloween, and Nick Castle had found out about that. He said, hey, he asked Carpenter, he was like, hey, can I hang out on the set and, just kind of absorb what you're doing, and, because I want to, I'm working on being a director too, and this and that. And Carpenter was like, basically told him, he said, like, well, if you're going to be there, why don't you just be the Shape, or why don't you be the Killer? And he was like, okay. And then I think he was in like a lot of interviews I've seen with him. He was kind of confused as to why Carpenter wanted him to be the Killer. And so he asked him, he was like, so what is it about? What do you think? And he's like, and the Carpenter had said to him, I like the way you walk. There's something about your walk that I think would work well in this film. And so that's basically his thing, is he just kind of, was buddies with Carpenter and wanted to be on set, and then ended up playing the Killer. He's not an actor. Nick Castle's not an actor. He just, and in the scenes, it's kind of funny because the scenes that he's in, and there's one interview on one of the Halloween DVDs where he like talks about how when they were filming the movie, he asked Carpenter like, okay, so what's my motivation? What am I supposed to be thinking about when I act this scene out? And Carpenter just looked at him and said, Nick, just walk. And so that's kind of how he left it at that. So it's very, again, going back to the Michael Myers character in the original Halloween, they called him the Shape for a reason, because basically he just kind of popped in and out of scenes, or he would walk across the street, or, I mean, it was very minimal acting involved there. But yeah, I always thought that Nick Castle just had this kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but like this kind of like vibe to him when he was in character as Michael Myers that just worked for it. It seemed so natural, and he had this kind of walk, and like especially the scene where he's chasing Laurie across the street at the end of the movie, the final chase, and it's like when I think of Michael Myers, I always think of that, and it's like, yeah, that's the portrayal.
But him and John Carpenter went on to work on a few other things too. So they went and they worked on The Fog together. Well, I shouldn't say they worked on The Fog together. Actually, Nick Castle's name is mentioned in The Fog. One of the characters is named after him. He co-wrote the script for Escape from New York, and then they worked on Big Trouble in Little China together. Now, this was something that I wasn't aware of until you pointed it out to me not too long ago. And as we're talking, you guys can hear these guys under us talking. And that is the band, the Coupe de Villes, which was John Carpenter, Tommy Lee Wallace, and Nick Castle. And they did the title song for Big Trouble in Little China, and it's just this shitty, cheesy 80s band that the first time I listened to the album, and I don't know, I never went and looked and see how much other stuff they had out there other than their first album, but I mean, it is everything you would think of if somebody said, what does 80s music sound like?
Wasn't the album called something like Getting Through the 80s or something like that?
Waiting Out the 80s or Waiting on the 80s or something?
Okay. Yeah, it was like, so they were kind of like, I kind of got the vibe from that album title that it was like they were sort of anti-80s. Like,
oh, man, but it is everything. The only thing that is missing from that album is a rap. That's funny. That's the only thing that's missing is, just like those. And rap in the 80s was completely different than it is nowadays. I mean,
oh yeah, but totally different.
But I mean, it's just, there's a couple of songs that kind of sound like Tom Petty-ish, and then there's a couple of songs that kind of sound like whatever Starship, whatever it was. And then, just the whole like 80s like pop rock radio stuff. That's what this album sounded like. Not hair band stuff at all, but just
pop rock.
Yeah, just that pop rock stuff. Like I said, like Jefferson Starship and Tom Petty a little bit, and all that kind of stuff that John Cougar Mellencamp. Well, back in those days, it would have been like Johnny Cougar, 38 Special, all that stuff that would hey, let's get on the Cocktail soundtrack. That's kind of what that album reminded me of.
There's actually I think Carpenter always talked about how he wanted to be in a rock and roll band back in the day, and then he kind of veered over to film school and all that stuff, and that kind of became his thing. But I guess that they had like there was these three guys collaborated a few times, I think, and I think they probably did have, because I'm kind of like losing my train of thought here. Hold on. Okay, so anyhow, after Halloween wrapped, there was like a rap party, and there's a few pictures out there, and actually I'll send you one if I can find it, of Tommy Lee Wallace, Nick Castle, and John Carpenter wearing the Michael Myers masks. There were like 3 different masks used in the movie, probably maybe 1 or 2 more as well, but they're wearing the masks, and for a lot of us geeks who are mask collectors and are really into the 1975 Captain Kirk mask, all the shots or photos that exist of it are, we always like look for that. But there's a shot of all 3 of them playing guitars and singing and stuff after the wrapping of Halloween. And so I think they had like this sort of band thing going on for a long time. What are your thoughts of him as the Shape when you look back at all of it?
I would have to say that the original Halloween movie from 1978 is the definitive Shape when you look at all of them. When anybody says Michael Myers, one of the things that I always think of is the scene when he kills Bob.
Oh, yeah.
The head tilt. And there's always been a dispute as to who came up with that idea. Look at the body hanging on the wall, kind of curious, like a puppy or, an innocent child kind of a thing.
Oh, yeah, right.
And I don't think that any of the following sequels ever got that right. There was a few attempts at that, and whether it was, the body language wasn't exactly right. But that first movie with the Shape is just, nowadays it's not terrifying at all, but to those of us of a certain age, it still kind of is in a way, you're like, just gives you the creeps a little bit, to whereas, our kids nowadays can watch that and be like, oh, whatever, some weirdo in a mask.
It doesn't hold a candle. Yeah, I always thought he did a great job as the Shape, and actually, Dick Warlock took over in part 2, and a lot of people are fans of Dick Warlock's performance, and he did a real robotic, like he took he just kind of like if you watch Halloween 2, he's just basically like you would think he was an android the way he moves, and he just kind of basically did that, but the original Nick Castle version of the Shape was just, I don't know, it just had such a cool sort of vibe to the way he moved. I still like to this day he'll always be my favorite version of it. And I actually got the chance to say that to him, which was kind of cool when when we met him at Flashback, and I shook his hand and I told him, I said, you've always been my favorite Michael Myers out of all of them. And then he said, yeah, all the others pale in comparison. So I always thought that was pretty funny.
I would say that probably out of the behind the scene, or not behind the scenes guys, but, of the big 3, when it comes to them, Freddy Krueger was played by Robert Englund, who was an actor. And then Jason Voorhees was played by multiple people over the years. And so was Michael Myers. But those two, Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers, primarily played by stuntmen. That was kind of the thing. And then Friday the 13th got to part 7, and Kane Hodder stepped into the role. And even though he was a stuntman, he kind of took a more of a, how is this character supposed to be? How is he supposed to portray himself? What's my motivation for this kind of a thing? The heavy breathing and that kind of stuff. I would compare Nick Castle's portrayal of the Shape, who, Nick Castle was not a stuntman at all. I mean, look at Nick Castle. He's not a stuntman.
Right.
To, Kane Hodder's portrayal of Jason Voorhees, or Robert Englund's portrayal of Freddy Krueger. He's not a stuntman playing the character at all. He is, like you had said before, he's trying to figure out, what's my motivation? Why am I doing this? What's my temperament supposed to be, and that kind of stuff. So, which is kind of funny that they had that for the very first movie, and then they never had that again in any of the other ones.
Yeah, he'll always be my favorite Shape, and that's why I was so excited when I found out that he was recently cast as Michael Myers again for this new upcoming movie that's come Halloween. I guess it's just called Halloween. It's a follow-up to the original. And it's coming out this year in October, and I'm really excited to see what he does. And I know we talked about a little bit that apparently Nick Castle sent a video of him on a treadmill wearing a Michael Myers mask to the production the production people at this new Halloween movie to show that the Shape can still walk. And so it's kind of made its way around social media, and a lot of people are talking about it. And it's kind of cool that he did that. I don't know if that was why they let him take the role or how it all worked out. But anyhow, regardless, he's got the role back, and he is going to be, you think about the character of the Shape, Michael Myers, whatever you want to call him. They pretty much always get people like, unknowns and, because it doesn't really matter because the guy's wearing a mask the whole time. But then the reality is it does kind of matter because they're trying to recapture that vibe of the original film. And so you got to get the guy who did it.
We were talking off air. They are supposedly finally starting shooting Halloween 2018, whatever you want to call it. And they're still casting, which is a little odd, even though they started filming. Nick Castle is going to be, well, they don't refer to him as the Shape. They just call him Michael Myers now, which is kind of sad because you kind of lost that. Because I even think Rob Zombie referred to Michael Myers as the Shape. Maybe he didn't. I'd double check on that. But Nick Castle's going to be the Shape in this new one, but then also some, younger stuntman is going to be the Shape for the stunts and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Which makes me, think that, okay, so Nick Castle's going to be probably in maybe a quarter of the Michael Myers scenes.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
But I think also too, this new one I think is, I hope they don't fuck it up, because I really think that this new Halloween movie is going to be one of these Halloween movies that they're making specifically for the fans, with Nick Castle and Jamie Lee Curtis back as Laurie Strode. And John Carpenter's executive producer, and he's supposedly doing the score for it. And maybe it's the old man in me coming out, but I really am just so fearful that we are going to get Halloween Resurrection Part 2 is what we're going to end up with.
The scary part about this, and let's be realistic about it, is that there's a lot of similarities to what's going on now and what was going on with the Texas Chainsaw 3D movie. In that film, they basically kind of disqualified or took out all the sequels and said, okay, let's just do a follow-up to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. And then they even got Gunnar Hansen. I mean, he didn't play Leatherface, so it's not quite the same as having Nick Castle back playing Michael Myers, but Gunnar Hansen is actually in that film. And so they tried to do let's do a follow-up to the original film, years later or whatever, and that movie turned out to be pretty terrible. Did we ever review that one?
No, no, we
That's probably a
can.
good thing.
I mean, we totally can.
We should probably hit it eventually. But
When we run out
yes.
of all of other good movies, we'll get back to Texas Chainsaw 3D.
Yeah, so that one just kind of so it's it. I remember on paper that one sounded like, oh, this is a great idea, and they're going to get it right, and the fans are going to be so happy, and oh, they rebuilt the house and it looks just like the original, and they're going to follow it up, and they're going to get rid of all the complications with the sequels and just do a follow up to the original, and everybody was totally excited about that, and then it came out and it was like, that was pretty terrible. So it's like kind of at this point, I think we're all pretty jaded when it comes to these sequels and prequels and reboots and remakes and all that. So we're sort of like a new Halloween movie's coming out. It's probably going to suck, but hey, well, I'll go. Might as well go see it. But I mean, again, you got Carpenter somewhere there in the background picking up a check. You got Nick Castle for the first time. You got Jamie Lee Curtis. And to be honest with you, I'm a huge original Halloween fan, but I did not like. I mean, I thought it was okay at the time, but like nowadays, like H2O just didn't hold up at all, really, in my opinion. And I'm curious if this will be like what, like a good follow up and will work. But either way, it's I guess we'll have to just wait and see. But
Yeah, we will. We will. So we didn't touch on some of the other aspects of Nick Castle's career. And
he has a career outside of Michael Myers?
Barely. And now I hope you did your homework for this, because I told you that if we were going to do this, that you needed to watch Major Payne, Dennis the Menace, and Mr. Wrong. So we're going to talk about all three of those movies in detail right now.
I think I've seen bits and pieces of Mr. Wrong back in the day. I think I've seen some of Dennis the Menace on TV. It was on like a year ago or something. And The Last Starfighter, I remember thinking that was supposed to be a big deal back in the day in the 80s, but it like turned out to be sort of like didn't really work out, I guess. But that was another one that was always on cable back in like the mid 80s. It seemed like it was. I remember always turning on HBO and it's The Last Starfighter again. But to be honest with you, I don't know what the story is.
Yeah, I didn't watch any of them. I actually, it's even funny because my wife is a huge Ellen DeGeneres fan. And I was like, oh, we should probably watch Mr. Wrong in preparation for the Nick Castle show we're doing. She's like, I'm not watching that. Like,
don't watch that.
So, yeah, I didn't watch any of them either. But yeah, he did go on after his fame from being the Shape in Halloween he did pursue his directing and writing career a little bit. But he didn't make anything, I don't think, anything notable. I don't think you could say Nick Castle in a crowd of people and somebody's going to be like, oh yeah, Dennis the Menace, that was a great movie.
No, he film-wise, that he never really was attached to anything that you would be like, oh, that's a great film or whatever, other than Halloween. But his director job, none of the movies that he did were like, oh, and he did Tap too, with the movie about the tap dancers. And
okay.
It's kind of funny because like I never saw Tap, and I don't have any desire to watch Tap, but like when I found out he did that, I was like, oh, okay. Because like I remember Tap, some movie in the late 80s, it like that I must have rented 1 billion times from the video store, had the Tap trailer like at the beginning. So I remember watching the Tap trailer like all the time. And I'm probably on a couple of videos that I always rented back then. So be curious to wonder actually which film that was that I was renting so often. But
it is funny when you throw in these VHS tapes nowadays, especially if you have any rental ones that you had picked up. Some of the previews that they show, and you're like, oh, that looks horrible. Or sometimes it's a movie though like that. You're talking. not that I've seen Tap. I probably have seen Tap, or at least parts of it. But, when a movie comes on and you're like, oh, I remember that movie. That movie was cool.
Right.
And then you can't find it anymore because, it never got on DVD or Blu-ray or anything.
Yeah, I wonder how many hidden gems are floating around still. How do we rate Nick Castle then? Do we give him I guess rating him in terms of his, obviously we're not fans of his director, the films he's directed. It's not our thing, I guess. I mean, and his music career with John Carpenter and the Coupe de Villes, we could probably say, yeah, well, that's the 80s for you, and whatever. But as Michael Myers, as The Shape, when it all comes down to it, that's the only reason we're really talking about him. It's what his performance in 1978 and his upcoming performance this year, and that we will see and witness in October. But as far as playing The Shape, I give him a huge thumbs up. He's the best one out of all of them, in my opinion. And another thing too, and this is sort of a geeky thing, but I've mentioned before, I'm into masks, and I've always been like the Captain Kirk and the original Michael Myers mask has always been a big thing for me. Well, anyhow, the way he wore the mask, well known as the castle stretch, and that's just because he has a longer head and he stretched the latex out in a way that kind of gave it a kind of a cool look in the movie. Like the guy Dick Warlock, who wore it in the second movie, the same mask, had a different shaped head, so it looks like a different mask almost when you see some shots. But anyhow, the castle stretch, which a lot of these independent filmmakers or mask makers are trying to capture in some of their molds, was based the way his head fit in the mask, which is kind of a funny thing to say, but his image as Michael Myers in terms of visually what he looked like, and plus his walk and his performance is top notch, so I give him a total thumbs up.
Yeah, I would have to say he gets a thumbs up for me as well. So before we completely wrap it up for this episode, we're going to try something that, well, we've done this a few times and we've had a little bit of success with it. I was trying to tie this to Nick Castle, and I think I did in sort of a way. So as we've talked about numerous times on this episode, Nick Castle worked on the original Halloween movie with John Carpenter, as well as Tommy Lee Wallace. And Tommy Lee Wallace directed the 90s version of It, which was, well, depending on which side of the coin you fall on, was remade or retold or rebooted last year. 2017's It just came out on Blu-ray and DVD and 4K last week. And I have in front of me the code for a digital download of It. And we'll go ahead and we'll try to do a giveaway. If you want to get the code so you can download It for yourself, all you got to do is send us a message on our Facebook page. Just tell us, hey, I was listening to the Nick Castle episode and it was great, or I was listening to this Nick Castle episode and you guys were a piece of shit. And send me the It code and we'll send it to you. That's all you got to do.
Nice. Yeah, we are pretty giving these days, huh?
We are. So, we've given away a Blade guy and we're giving away It.
Oh my goodness!
What else? We've given away some other stuff in the past, but I mean this would be the best deal for me because this one won't cost me a dime to give this one away. I don't even have to pay for postage.
Perfect.
I'll just send you the details in the direct message after you send us a message. So
awesome.